Welcome to Miami Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. Hopefully everybody had a great Thanksgiving, but we got a lot of Dolphins news to discuss here on today's show as we head into NFL Week 13, where Miami takes on the New Orleans Saints coming out of their bye week. There was a lot of games that impacted the playoff odds for the Dolphins yesterday on Thanksgiving. We also got to talk about a roster move. We got to talk about some injury news. We got a lot to talk about on today's show, but make sure you do subscribe to the channel as we're bringing you daily Dolphins content. We'll start with the roster move. Miami made a very simple change to their practice squad and active roster. They signed linebacker Caleb Johnson to the active roster. He was on the Dolphins practice squad. We covered his addition to the P squad, I think about a month ago. Spacing on the date, but yeah, we did cover him being signed. And they also replaced him on the practice squad by signing linebacker Jimmy Ciarlo. Now, I don't know if that name sounds familiar to you. He really has never done anything in the NFL, but if you watched Hard Knocks with the Buffalo Bills, he was a very popular player that did not make their 53-man roster during roster cutdown day. So if the name sounds familiar or you know who that is, well, that's probably because you watched Hard Knocks with the Buffalo Bills back in July and August. But little switcheroo there on the active roster for Miami, and it's really nothing to talk about here. He's going to be your fifth linebacker. There's no really injuries to Willie Gay, KJ Britt, Jordan Brooks, or Tyrell Dodson, so it's more of a depth move and a special teams move, if you will. Remember, just last week, they placed Jordan Colbert on injured reserve. He was a key special teams player in that fifth linebacker slash safety hybrid, so that's just replacing Colbert on the 53-man roster for special teams and positional value. So nothing more to go on there. Let's move over to the injury news now. Injury reports for Miami, relatively clean. Now, there was a scare about Jalen Waddle earlier in the week. He was limited in practice, popped up with a toe/foot injury. Well, he was upgraded from DNP to limited on Thursday, and he is going to be playing. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that Jalen Waddle plays on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints, which is obviously very important. He is the second best offensive player for Miami, the best wide receiver, and if Waddle wasn't playing on Sunday, I really question how the Dolphins would move the football through the air, but I don't think that's something that Miami should be concerned with whatsoever. Now, Miami actually is relatively fully healthy. Like, if you're not on injured reserve, you probably are going to be able to play in this game. So Mike McDaniel and company will have to choose who are the healthy inactives for this game at home against the New Orleans Saints. But all eyes look towards the players that could return off of IR. Austin Jackson and Darren Waller both had their 21-day practice window open. Jackson about a week and a half ago, Darren Waller just on Wednesday. So Waller can remain on injured reserve for the next really 18 days before he has to be activated the 53-man roster or his season is over. Austin Jackson doesn't have that much time. Like, it's either he gets activated today or tomorrow before the game against the Saints, or he gets activated on Monday. If he doesn't get activated from the 21-day window IR to the active 53-man roster by December 2nd, he is going to miss the rest of the season. So I do almost expect Miami to make that notice today in the afternoon or maybe in the mid-afternoon on Saturday prior to the game, but you would hope to see Austin Jackson back on the football field for the Dolphins this Sunday. Now the question is, what is his role going to be? Is he going to go right back to that starting right tackle position, or is he going to be more or less a depth swing tackle since Larry Borom has played so well? They talked earlier in the week, and there's really no discussions about the Dolphins potentially moving Larry Borom to right guard and putting Austin Jackson to right tackle like we talked about. And I guess that's fine. I would have preferred Miami to maybe explore that, but that's ultimately not going to be the case. So it doesn't know what Austin Jackson's role is going to be. Don't even know if he's going to be activated. But obviously Darren Waller is now the one that's intriguing. Waller dominating for Miami in those first three games that he played in against the Jets, against the Panthers, against the Chargers, where he had 4 touchdowns, where he was able to just be a comfort target for Tua. I mean, his activity inside the red zone and on key third downs just was absolutely massive. And he would really provide Miami with another receiving threat over the middle of the field, especially in the red zone, as I just mentioned. Now, we've talked about this on the channel over the past week. Even if Darren Waller returns this week, you can't abandon what's made your offense so good over the past 4 to 5 weeks, which is playing that 6 offensive lineman personnel, utilizing Daniel Brunskill as an inline tight end, giving yourself that 6 offensive line look, because since Miami started using that in week 7, when Darren Waller was placed on IR, Miami's offense is top half in the NFL in EPA per play, in rush EPA, rush per drop back, in rush success percentage. Like, they are a top half offense in the NFL since week 7, after being a bottom 10 offense through the first 6 weeks of the season. So you cannot abandon that strategy in personnel usage that has allowed you to have so much more success offensively. I almost would utilize Darren Waller as like a big slot or even an X wide receiver at times, because he does have the speed and size to do that on the outside, especially on in-breaking routes, slants, crossers. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Miami utilizes Waller when he returns. But one thing is certain in my eyes: you cannot take away the Daniel Brunskill 6 offensive line package, because it has been so successful, which allowed Tua to be even better in play action scenarios. Miami's been the 3rd best play action team in terms of QB rating, success percentage, EPA per play over the last month. So you cannot abandon that personnel usage that has provided you with so much success. We're going to get to the Dolphins' playoff chances here in just one second, but this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's officially the holiday season, folks. What does that mean? There's bowl games, there's playoff pushes, there's basketball every night, and there's hockey as well. So while people are making decisions on what to eat and what to get people for gifts, well, the feeling of being right is always good over on PrizePicks. I play it every single Dolphins game. You know that. I do it almost every day as well with the Miami Heat. I've been having a lot of success with more than on Kalaware rebounds if you're a basketball guy. And they actually have a new feature as well called early cash outs, which means you can actually get your money if your entry is going off to a hot start. Yeah, you can just touch a button sometimes and get your money early. How you play is up to you. You can choose the flex play, where you get paid even if one of your picks misses. You want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter your play, PrizePicks is a great way to put your takes to the test. You know what I'll be doing this week? I'll be going more than on Devon Achane fantasy score. I think he has a big game against the Saints this Sunday. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Let's segue over to the Dolphins' playoff chances now, because we did talk about what happened going into the bye week, what Miami needed to root for, what they needed to have happen for their chances to go up. And then we talked about on Monday how the Dolphins literally lost their bye week because every single situation that Miami needed and the result they needed was the opposite. They needed the Chiefs to lose, they won. They needed the Jaguars to win or lose, they won. So it wasn't so good. But that changes a little bit after Thanksgiving Thursday Night Football. Miami's playoff odds, if they won out, to finish the year 10-7, because we don't have a conversation unless Miami gets to 10 wins. So we're always going underneath the thought that they end up winning out and they're 10-7. What needs to happen every single week from that point? So it was at a 22% chance that Miami makes the playoffs if they win out. After the Thursday night games, yeah, I know, just 3 games played, but after the results, that number jumped up from 22% to 29%. So it's not that big of a jump. Miami still doesn't have a lot of good odds, but the bump up, massive for Miami. You look at what they were dealing with here. You had the Chiefs lose to the Cowboys. They fall to 6-6. That's big time. You had the Ravens lose to the Bengals, and that moves the Bengals to 4-8, moves the Ravens to 6-6. Now, I still think it would be better if the Ravens ultimately win the division, so I think I would be rooting for the Ravens to win and the Steelers to lose, personally, because Miami already lost to Baltimore, so you wouldn't have the tiebreaker over them if you tied with them in the standings at the end of the year. for a wild card spot, but we're sitting at 29% right now. Now, I think most of that bump up was ultimately because of the Chiefs' loss, which is big time there. Chiefs 6-6. They still play the Broncos. They still play the Chargers again. Not an easy schedule for the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll see what happens there. They play the Texans next week as well. That will be pivotal. Miami, if you want them to make the playoffs, the rooting guide is very simple this upcoming week. But before we do that and get to that, I want to know your confidence level in the Dolphins winning on Sunday. Scale it 1 to 10 for me. Also, big updates here. Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, DNP for the Saints on Thursday's practice. Dolphins are 6-point favorites. Saints aren't very good, and they could be missing their starting running back Kamara and Chris Olave. DNPs on Thursday usually don't bode well for your playing status on Sunday, so we'll ultimately have to see how that plays out. But to close out today's show, here is the rooting guide for Miami this Sunday. Obviously, if you want them to make the playoffs, you got to win out. So the Dolphins have to beat the New Orleans Saints. But you would like to see Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans at home take down the Jacksonville Jaguars. Can the number 1 overall pick do his hometown college team, city, if you will, a favor and beat the Jags? We'll see, but that one would be massive for the Dolphins since Jacksonville is 7-4 and holding on to that 6th playoff spot. The 5th seed is the Chargers. Could you see the Las Vegas Raiders upset them? Probably not, but the 2 biggest results this week for Miami, if they want to make the playoffs, would be the Tennessee Titans beating the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Las Vegas Raiders beating the Los Angeles Chargers. So if you want the Dolphins to make the playoffs, those are the 2 biggest outcomes that would boost Miami's playoff chances. A couple other ones that would boost it, not as much as the ones we just mentioned, would be the Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are sneaky, not a playoff lock. Like, they're the 7th seed, yeah, but they're sitting there at 7-4. And they're just simply not playing good football right now. And if they lose to the Steelers, who are playing in Pittsburgh this weekend, I believe. No, I actually think it's in Buffalo. It's in Buffalo. So scratch that thought. That is going to very look bad for Buffalo with a game against the Eagles on the horizon, another game against the Patriots. Like, if the Bills lose to the Steelers, they lose to the Eagles, and they lose in New England, that's 7 losses. So, yeah, if Miami gets a 10-7, they could absolutely, potentially have the tiebreaker over Buffalo since they split the season series this year. And the last result Miami should be rooting for is the Indianapolis Colts to beat the Houston Texans. Houston 6-5. They lose the fall to 6-6. You'd have a bunch of teams bunched up at 6-6 there, like the Texans, like the Chiefs, like the Ravens, like the Steelers potentially. So we'll see how this ultimately plays out. But Miami's needed results on Thanksgiving certainly boded well for them, and we'll just have to continue to see how the things go here. And we'll have a video out tomorrow on the channel. Hopefully everybody had a good Thanksgiving and a holiday week, and we'll be back live on the channel Sunday for Dolphins Saints Week 13 football. So hopefully you join us then. Go Fins. See you then.